Hello and welcome to the Turnbuckle Sessions. I am your host, Thomas Montalto, the OGFigKid, and joining me today is none other than one of our Turnbuckle Tavern brethren. It is young Anthony. What's going on, young Anthony?
What's going on? First time on the sessions. Glad to be here. Honored that you picked me this week. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Dude, I'm really looking forward to it because I think it's going to be different because you're the youngest guest we've had on. You're not even 21 yet, right?
Nope, I am not even 20 yet.
So you're not even 20 yet?
Nope, in February I will be.
Oh, I didn't realize you were only 19. I can't have you on. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's going to be interesting to hear your story of like falling in love with wrestling because it's going to be much different than a lot of the other people we've had on here. So,
Yeah,
dude,
for
what
sure.
are your earliest memories of wrestling?
Oh man. So I was introduced to wrestling by my dad in 2009. And the first show that I ever watched was November 16th, 2009. It was a Monday Night Raw at Madison Square Garden. And the main event of that show was, and I literally am so, I am so happy that this was the first main event that I ever watched. It was Jericho, which was Jericho and the Big Show, versus D-Generation X of Shawn Michaels and Triple H, versus then world champions The Undertaker and John Cena in a huge main event. I'm I still haven't rewatched that match because it feels so special to me that I want to wait until like a milestone of being a wrestling fan to go and rewatch that match. Because also on that show was when Kofi Kingston did that big leg drop to Randy Orton. It was such a, like, looking back on it, it was such a stacked card. But yeah, that was really like my earliest memory. Besides that, I used to be friends with two people at my middle school, like elementary middle school, and we used to drive them home on certain days. And their dad is actually Carlos Cabrera, who's the Spanish announcer for the WWE, and it's
Oh, wow.
still the Spanish announcer. So his kids basically got me into it too. So a lot of different people that got me into wrestling around that 2009 period.
Wow. So, okay, so getting to know you, I'm always impressed with how much you know about wrestling history from way before you were born. And
Yeah.
I guess it's a normal thing to watch older stuff when you're a kid because you want to get as much of it as you can. I remember when I was a kid, I was going back and I was watching Bruno Sammartino versus Larry Zbyszko and Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at Shea Stadium. I don't know if you ever saw that in a steel
Yep, I
cage.
have. That was before he body slammed him at Mania. He
Yeah.
body
Oh
slammed
yeah.
him at Shea.
Way before.
Yeah.
Um, so what did you when did you start diving into the history of wrestling? Like right away, or did that take some time?
Honestly, I would say right away. I don't remember if there was like a specific pinpoint moment, but I remember like immediately because that first pay-per-view around that time that I really like paid attention to was like TLC. It was like the first TLC that they did. And I remember around that time, like looking up like different stats. And I don't know when I got it, but I got like that big like encyclopedia of the WWE, like the original one from 2008 ish.
Right.
And like I would just like read that like cover to cover, like looking at all the stats and everything, like seeing like all these different names. And like I would know like a little bit about them, but like I would never really like know, like I have never seen them before, but I would know the names, like I would associate the names to the faces and everything. So like that book really was where most of my knowledge came from. But like I would just be like looking up YouTube videos and like watching, I would always go back and watch like um some of the favorite things I would watch on YouTube were the funeral parlor. That was always like my favorite thing to watch. Um I would love to watch Rikishi because I just thought he was like such an interesting character. Just his move set and everything. And I loved the Hogan and Andre build for Mania 3.
Oh,
Just like
I
everything with
still go back and watch that.
Jesse the Body and Roddy Piper, like all of that combined. And like even like just random matches. Like I remember there was some battle royal in like 92 or 93 that it was like Undertaker was in it, a few other notable names. But like I just remember like seeing that star, and it was like before Raw, before anything. I just remember seeing like that star power, and like I just remember like those matches being like the main things of where I got that knowledge from. And little by little, like I would start to like know everything. Like I remember being at my friend's house for SummerSlam one year, and they were talking about like different like things in history, and like when they didn't know something, I would be the one to like fill in that blank and be like, oh, it was that person. Like they were like, yeah, Brock Lesnar pushed this guy down a flight of steps. I don't remember what his name is. And then I pop in, I'm like, oh, it's Zach Gowen, he had one leg. And they were like, how do you remember this? I was like, it's not that I remember it, I just know about it, and yeah, I mean, like I don't even know how I knew more back then than I do now. I feel like my memory is like slowly fading as far as like historical wrestling, just because I haven't been like as on top of it as I used to be. Like I used to read that book like all the time, but like nowadays, like I still know everything, obviously, but like I feel like I was even more in tap when I was younger.
That's awesome. That's a great story. So, okay, so in your, I guess it's about 10 years you've been watching wrestling?
Yeah,
Is
just
that
over
about
10. It's about
just over 10. Have you
11,
ever
12.
tapped out? Let's be honest, in your 10 years of watching WWE, it isn't the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
Now, at your age, you don't know this because you weren't around for the Attitude Era or the Golden Era.
Mhm.
So, you know, I like to say that like your favorite era of wrestling is the era you grew up with, the one that you fell in love with.
Right.
Do you feel that for you? Is that your favorite era?
I mean, well, let me put in my headphones real quick. Sorry, I didn't do this earlier, but um I should have did this off camera, but I always have to do this on.
That's
Can
all
you still
right.
hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. All right. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily say that like the era that I grew up with was my all-time favorite. Like if you're saying like grew up like when I started, I was right in the middle of the PG era, or really at the start of the PG era, because it was like 2009. And sure, it was like a lot of big names, but like you can't really say that you love the PG era. It's just like it was there. Um,
Hey, listen, if Sam Roberts could say his favorite era is the New Gen era.
That's very true. I commend him for that one. But I mean, I will say that if anything, like this has probably been my favorite era, or really even one of my favorite years as a wrestling fan has been this year, just because there's so much that has happened, both on AEW and WWE, that it's just exciting to watch. Like this is probably the most exciting time to be a wrestling fan, at least in my like span of being a wrestling fan. Just because like what the WWF and WCW was for your generation, that's kind of what I'm getting with WWE and AEW. Completely different levels, but like that sense of competition and the sense of the alternative, that's kind of what I'm getting here. So like, I haven't gone back and watched as much Attitude Era or Ruthless Aggression as I really should, because it's on the network and because I can just tune into it. But from what I've seen, there's like your question was like there hasn't ever really been a time that I tapped out. And that's really because like that's what I grew up with, like I don't know anything else than, from that 2010 to 2020, 2021 period. I really just, there's obviously some good and some bad, but like I was never the type of person to be like, Roman Reigns won the Royal Rumble. Well, I'm to cancel my network. Like I was, plus
Me
I
either.
was younger. Like, obviously I'm not going to do any of that. But like, yeah, there was never really a time that I was like, no, I'm going to stop being a fan, because like, obviously I was younger and well, still young. And that's kind of just what I've known for the last few years.
You were younger, Anthony.
Younger Anthony.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I do agree. Like, I agree that this point in time is an amazing time to be a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree. AEW is off the charts. I love seeing AEW throwing little digs at WWE. It reminds me of the Monday Night Wars. The only thing is it's time for WWE to start stepping up their game a little bit and fighting back. And I just don't know if they care to do that. I don't think they feel the need to do that. But at least you have AEW.
Yeah, I mean, like from what it seems for me, it's not a war like how it was with WCW and WWF because from what I have picked up on being a historian of wrestling or whatever is that like you had two companies that were completely at level with each other in all areas, right? WWF and WCW, and they were literally going at it on the same night, with guys jumping ship and everything, and it was at the peak of wrestling, and that pushed WWF to go further. When it comes to AEW and WWE, in terms of, there's different levels to it, I think. No one's comparing to the WWE as far as being, and as much as we hate to say it, like an entertainment company. That's what makes them the biggest company, is because they're not a wrestling company. They're an entertainment brand. They've transcended wrestling at this point. Wrestling is like, it's almost taken a back step.
Right.
It's about the entertainment. There's so many other areas to it. Sure, at the same time though, AEW has far surpassed WWE in terms of booking and storytelling and the talent that they have. So there's different levels to it. You can't really say that it's a war, because for it to be a war you need equal playing field. You need equal, this is one company with a lot of money and a lot of great wrestlers and great storytelling and a wrestling company, and this is another company with the equal amount, and they're going at it. I don't really see that this is a war, just like how I didn't see that AEW versus NXT was really a war. There hasn't really been a war ever since WWF and WCW, at least from what I'm seeing, because there's no equalness in wrestling nowadays. But that is kind of what I like, is that there's variety now. If you want to go for more, goofy storytelling and, the stars like Cena and Brock, then you go to WWE. But if you like that more along the lines of like subtle storytelling and really good in-ring action, then you go for AEW. It's that variety. And I think, honestly, I would rather have that than a war at the end of the day. You have different levels to it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree, but and it's people trying to recreate the wars.
Right.
People, because that was a magical time in wrestling. But I do love the little shots fired at each other. Let's
Oh,
keep
yeah.
that up. And
I
that
mean,
started
you always
right
need that.
before AEW was even started. Triple H took shots at the Hall of Fame, calling it a pissant company.
Yeah.
And then they fire it back, and then WWE, well, Triple H sends out a memo congratulating AEW and they're saying they're not competition. And realistically, they're not competition. When you have $1 billion company,
Mhm.
they're not competition. They're
Right.
not. I don't think WWE cares. But when you compare simply wrestling product to wrestling product, like as a fan, I'm AEW.
Yeah.
As the guy that's loved WWE for 40 years, I still can't shut it off. I still watch it and
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
try to enjoy it as much as I can, but sometimes I just feel more disconnected now, and I blame my enjoyment for AEW to see like what it could be like if they were making a wrestling show for a guy my age that's been watching wrestling forever. So
Yeah. I mean, for me, WWE is turning into, and not necessarily turning into, because I feel like if you look back at their history, it's always been like rooted in moments. And you can especially see that in like this past year, that you would get every once in a while, like a really big moment. You would get like, John Cena coming back or Brock coming back, or, a good match every now and then. Like WWE thrives on their moments, not necessarily like spreading the wealth, but they know that like, this return is going to get this many views and this moment is going to get this rating. They kind of bank on that nowadays because they are such a big brand that it's like, why do we have to go 24/7 producing the best level of content when we know that we could at least, do this every once in a while and still, bring those fans back in? Because as much as we hate to admit it, we're still going to watch. We watch Survivor Series. We're probably going to watch Day One. You know, to them, they're kind of banking on the fact that they are the WWE. They are the biggest company. You're still going to come back and watch. Whereas AEW, they're kind of spreading it out, and that's equally as probably better. To do, obviously, is that you have that just longevity that you could watch AEW and be satisfied every night. WWE, you're not satisfied every night, but there's always that one moment that it gets you hooked back in. And again, that just ties back to that variety, that it's like different mentalities, but at the same time, both are succeeding
Yeah,
in their own ways.
that's a great way to explain it. But as wrestling fans, we live for the moments.
Yeah,
AEW
absolutely.
has their moments. WWE has their
Mhm.
moments. Like, look, you go back to last week with CM Punk and MJF. What a friggin' moment that was.
Yeah.
You know, you got Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole debuting. Look, there's moments.
Oh,
Royal
yeah.
Rumble's everybody's favorite pay-per-view of the year because you're expecting no surprises. You want those moments.
Right,
I
right.
mean, if it wasn't for the moments, what would being a wrestling fan be?
Yeah,
You know, you wanna
obviously,
pop for
yeah,
those moments. So
yeah.
who's your favorite wrestler that you've actually watched over the last 10 years? Or a couple, you don't have to name just one.
Yeah, no, it would definitely have to be a couple. Well, number one obviously would have to be Undertaker. Like he was the guy first night that I watched wrestling. He was on the main show, and for the majority of my time in wrestling, and it's kind of weird because like I caught the tail end of the Undertaker, but at the
Mhm.
same time, it's like I still got a few good matches that
You
I
did.
saw from him. Like one of my favorite matches of all time was Taker and Shawn from WrestleMania 26 because that had so much story to it. And like all the streak matches and everything. Like I would really always bank on the fact that the Undertaker's streak was going to be at WrestleMania. That's not really what kept me watching, but like it made me so excited for Mania because it was like Taker's gonna fight. Like this is gonna be good. Like, it was always just that level of like, yes, seeing the Undertaker, um, and like witnessing his entrance live is just like unbelievable. So definitely has to be Taker as my number one. As far as other guys, like Cena, obviously, like I grew up with Cena, and we've had like a love-hate relationship because as I've learned more about wrestling, I've started to realize that Cena buries a lot of talent, and you start to become a more smart fan when you're older, I guess. But still, Cena's been one of the most consistent areas of wrestling for WWE in the last decade. And then like guys like Jeff Hardy, like I was always so annoyed because I never got to see Jeff Hardy wrestle in WWE because the moment I started watching in 2009 November, he left the company in what was it, June or July, or it might have even been like September around that time. So I just missed out on him. And then he shows up in TNA, which is even another area that I didn't even cover. Was that like for me, the only other option before AEW was TNA. I was really like, as much as I hate to admit it, like I was a big TNA fan. I would really watch TNA as much as I would WWE just because you had different
Wow.
names. Like sure, I would love to see Cena and Orton and all these guys, but like at the same time, you had guys like Jeff Hardy, RVD, Hulk Hogan was appearing on the show. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna watch this. So to see Jeff Hardy on that show and to see him kind of grow in TNA, it was really cool. But it was always just that part of me that was like, I really want to see him in WWE. And then when he shows up at WrestleMania 33, it's like I couldn't believe that I was like watching that. And then it was even more so to see him as a singles star now and to see him what he's doing now. It's like I'm happy and thankful that I was able to at least see him in WWE for a run. So that's really cool. But as far as other guys, like Shawn Michaels is up there. I love Edge, Punk. I really like Punk. Just so many other guys, but those are really like the core that I would say are my favorites.
Okay, you kind of answered my next question because I was gonna say, I asked who you actually watched for the last 10 years. I wanted to see who you went back and watched that was some of your
Oh,
favorites.
okay, yeah.
You said Shawn Michaels. You really didn't see him active at all. Was he retired by the time?
So I saw Sean like really like a few months of Sean.
Okay.
But yeah, I would go back and watch Sean. Um, it's weird because like I really liked Sean more in his 2000s run than I did his 90s run. Um, I never really caught on to 90s Shawn Michaels. And, we might talk about it later on. I might be like jumping the gun here, but with the Classic Match Classroom, I really get a better understanding of Shawn Michaels because, like, you know, I really was only exposed to like late 2000s Shawn when I was watching wrestling and, with DX and everything. But when you go back and watch Shawn in the 90s, especially around 97. when the Screwjob and Bret Hart and everything. Like, I don't really see how that era alone, outside of like his in-ring work, makes him a candidate for one of the greatest of all time. Because his character work, his mic skills, it's like so over the top, and it's just like I didn't like
Yeah.
Sean around that time. From when I'm going back and watching, but like his 2000s run, like I watched a lot of his matches with Jericho in the ladder match.
Oh, good
I already
matches. Good
mentioned
matches.
Taker and Sean, both of their matches. Like that to me makes his case as one of the greatest of all time. As far as other people that I went back and watched, Hogan was probably number one. I've seen so much Hulk Hogan, be it the Andre match, just all the promos in the world for Hogan. And that's really because like that's one of the guys that my dad really got me into because he was a big Hogan fan too. So yeah, he was really like the guy that kind of like hooked me on Hulk Hogan, and now seeing all of his promos and everything. Like I would say he was probably the number one guy I would go back and watch. Um, because honestly, like I haven't, like I mentioned, like I haven't really went back and watched as much as I should. But like, you know, from what I have seen, Hogan's probably number one.
That's a very good choice. Me growing up during the Hogan era, I feel so lucky that I got to see the golden era, the attitude era, and I get to see
Yeah,
what's happening
absolutely.
now. Like I love that I got to see that all. So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned the classic match classroom.
Yes.
Tell us about the podcast because it's so well done. It's so fascinating.
Thank you.
Talk about how it came about. Talk about how it makes you get a new appreciation of stuff that you haven't seen, or
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so basically the podcast came about. My good friend Tyler Wilson, all the way out in Canada, he has his own podcast, which I would like to shout out, Counted Out 7 with Mike and Tyler. um, and been friends with him for a while, ever since I started podcasting. And we would talk every now and then, and I kind of told him about how I never really went back and watched a lot of the most iconic matches of all time. Really, it comes down to name a match, and I probably haven't seen it. And I'm talking like big matches here. So with that, it was kind of his idea to kind of he told me one day, he was like, I think there's a show to be made out of this, where we just go back and watch these matches and get my first takes on them. And I think it's just such an interesting concept, like to have someone who is as young as I am, to really go back and experience a lot of the stuff that I wasn't even born for, let alone went back and watched ever. Uh, so to go back and watch like Austin and Hart, Hogan and Savage, all for the first time, it gives you like a different outlook on the different styles of wrestling, what different things evolved from. And yeah, like we've taken a little bit of a break now just because work and school and everything, but like we've touched on so many different stories that honestly I didn't even know were stories to begin with. Like we did an episode on Jimmy Snuka and Don Morocco, and I had no idea that Don Morocco and Jimmy Snuka had this whole story before like the iconic splash. Like I thought it was just
yeah.
like a random match.
Oh
Let
wow,
alone The Rock himself. With all his amazing promos, it gives you like a new appreciation for everything. Like seeing these guys that you really like wouldn't see before, like Don Morocco. We did Slaughter and Sheik in the boot camp match.
love
Uh,
that match.
yeah, so many like great stuff. We covered so much stuff from 1997. That's really where the my controversial opinion on Shawn Michaels comes from. But we did Undertaker and Kane, the Montreal Screwjob. We did Eddie versus Ray from WCW, all different stuff that I'd never seen before, but I wanted to see. And the thing is that I knew all these matches happened. I just never watched them.
Yeah,
So this finally gives me a platform where I can watch them and kind of give my first takes on them, because Tyler's seen everything, and a lot of the stuff he hasn't even seen before. So it's a really cool dynamic to see, like
yeah.
different things that he's seen that I haven't seen, some things that we both haven't seen, and overall, it's just a really good time. We release episodes when we are on schedule every Sunday. A lot of cool stuff that we have planned for the future.
I mean, so talk about the Montreal Screwjob. I'm kind of curious your view of it. I'm sure you talked about it. I didn't hear that episode of your podcast. As a guy who didn't live through it, what was it like going back and watching that? And did you at all feel like it was a work?
It was awkward. Um, because like there was so much that like even people don't even mention. Like if you go back and watch it, there's a spot where Earl Hebner gets knocked down. And like usually when you have a ref bump, the ref is going to be knocked down for a while. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just classic WWE is that the referee gets knocked down, he's knocked down forever. But here, Earl Hebner gets knocked down and immediately he pops back up. And that's when the moment happens. So I thought that was just a little cool. Like, no one really mentions that, little
I
things
don't
like that
remember that. I'm
happen.
gonna have to go back and check that
Yeah,
out.
go back and watch. I don't remember what exactly happened, but like he was knocked down and he just pops back. It wasn't even like he was knocked over or something. Like knocked down, pops back up. Montreal Screwjob happens. It was weird, like the weird cutoff. Like they immediately ran to the back. I honestly like. I kind of knew that they weren't going to show it on air, but like to see that the whole him writing WCW wasn't actually shown on. I always thought that it was shown like
That
on the
wasn't shown
broadcast.
on air?
Nope, they cut to Sean leaves and then they cut to black.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah,
I guess
I
I remember
mean,
that. You watched Wrestling with Shadows?
I did. Yes,
Yeah, what a
that was
documentary
my
that was.
main intro to all of that. Was the Wrestling with Shadows, and like you could really see it from like both sides, really, and that's what I love about
Oh,
that
100%.
documentary.
I can't pick a side.
Is like you could pick Brett's side, but at the same time, like there's some things that go against Brett. I
Yeah.
don't think it was a work. I think all of the story behind it, there's no way that it could have been a work. It was Vince getting that belt off of Brett.
See,
Um,
I don't know. I like to think it couldn't have been a work, but the fact that they're filming that documentary right at that time as
yeah,
everything goes
that's
down,
true.
like, that just, like, puzzles my mind. I'm like, "What?" Like, it doesn't seem like it's a work, and back then, I didn't think it was a work, but the more I look at it and the more I go back, I'm like, "Hmm,
Yeah,
we'll never know." Well, I don't think we'll ever know. I think most people don't believe it is a work. I'm
I
saying I
mean,
wouldn't
like
be shocked if it was.
if it wasn't a work, then like I think Vince is obviously to blame. Like it's always like who screwed Brett. Like obviously Vince screwed Brett. It wasn't any.
Brett
I mean,
screwed Brett. No, I'm kidding.
however, Brett screwed Brett. Going back and watching everything, like especially the documentary, there's a point to be made. So like I love that you mentioned the Wrestling with Shadows just because there's so many like dynamics to it, like so many outlooks and everything. So that was actually one of my favorite episodes that we went back and watched everything because it gave me that new outlook on Sean, like I mentioned, but it also
Yeah.
like really allowed me to detail everything of the screw job. And it's like you see all these things that not even people mention. Like I told you all that stuff, and you were like, "Wow, that happened." Like you really
Yeah.
get to go back and like see all this stuff, and it's like, shit, wow.
It's awesome. Rowdy Piper, you gotta go back and watch his stuff. I know I sent you the clips from
Yes,
the flower shop and the Piper's Pit battle. You must go back and watch
I
that.
gotta, I gotta definitely check those out. We'll make an
And
episode out of it for sure.
that's leading into the Hogan and Andre WrestleMania 3 setup.
Right?
So
Yeah,
it's like
that's true.
amazing how much Piper was intertwined with everything, and like how he got helped get that whole thing over and help build it, and Jesse
Mm,
Ventura being there.
yeah,
Like, just remember Jesse's reaction, his leg going up in the air, and his you could read his mouth when he says "wow" when Andre walks out with Bobby the Brain Heenan. It's just like that's what I live for. I could go back and watch that every single day and never get tired
yeah. I didn't
of
even
those
know there
clips.
was that much. Like, I didn't even know Ventura was involved in the Hogan and Andre, and then he comes out with the trophies and everything.
He
Oh
was
my
the one
gosh.
edging on the trophies. Why is Andre getting the
Yeah, this
smaller
trophy's
trophy?
bigger than this trophy. Oh,
Yep,
it's so great.
Jesse was so good too. Probably underrated, but what a great commentator he was.
Oh, yeah.
And the Body Shop. Did you ever watch any of the Body Shop clips?
I didn't, but that's
Ooh.
something I forgot to mention too. Like when I would go back and watch these old clips, because I would always watch them with my dad, like all of like the 80s and early 90s wrestling. Like, for me, the best commentary team of all time is Monsoon and Ventura. Like I could see Heenan, but like for me, I love Jesse Ventura and Gorilla Monsoon so much more, just because like Ventura had that like edge to him. Like obviously Heenan did too, but like I don't know, maybe it was because he was a former wrestler, or he just had that charisma to him. But he matched up so well with
I mean, I
Gorilla
loved
Monsoon.
Gorilla and Ventura. I love McMahon and Ventura, and I love Gorilla with Heenan. I don't think we ever saw Heenan and McMahon. I'm sure they would have been good.
Mm.
Like I think Vince is a very underrated
Oh,
commentator. I
he
thought
is.
he was so good.
Hmm.
I mean, I loved Vince back then. Even Vince, and you probably don't remember this, but on Superstars, it used to be Vince and Bruno Sammartino.
Wow,
Like, yeah,
I've heard of it, but I never like actually heard them talk. Wow, that's interesting.
yeah, yeah. I remember that in the early '80s to mid '80s, probably.
Yeah,
And yeah, it
I
was
mean, like going
interesting.
back and like watching a lot of like Vince as a commentator, like he would always, you always like hear the jokes about like what a maneuver and everything, but like he knew how to like tell stories, and I feel like that's
I
so
thought so.
important in commentary, and something that's lacking nowadays is like you don't tell the story of a match, and he was able to kind of like intertwine everything. He was really good
Yeah.
on the commentator.
I feel like the WWE commentary team just pales in comparison to AEW right now.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, without a doubt. I
And
will
you could
say
say
that I love
all you
Pat
wa
McAfee though, but I know that you don't. But all right,
I don't
continue.
hate him. I think Vince, he's probably doing exactly what Vince loves.
Absolutely.
I mean, I wanna knock him off the table when he gets up and dances when Nakamura's coming out,
Yeah.
but my wife pops for that. My wife loves it, so apparently women and kids must love it or something, and
Yeah.
dogs, I don't know. Um, I mean, some people do find it entertaining, but, like, you could talk, "Oh, yeah, they got Jim Ross and they got Tony Schiavone," but Excalibur is just as good as anybody on commentary. Like,
Mhm.
man, that guy has elevated his game since I guess it was the All In pay-per-view.
Yeah.
If you go back and listen to him then, and then when Dynamite started to now, boy, is that guy improved. But when you're working with 2 guys, Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone, you better improve. But even a sound, like the WWE announcers don't have that sound that like
Right.
makes calling matches special. I know people say, "Oh, how good Michael Cole is." No, he's not. He's really not. Like when a lot of people don't like somebody, a lot of people aren't wrong.
Right.
Like just because you work with somebody and you see how much work he puts into it doesn't make him a good announcer. If
Yeah.
that
I
makes any
mean, for
sense.
me, like I didn't watch a lot of the early AEW just because like it wasn't for me yet.
Yeah. I
Um
agree. I didn't either. I fast forwarded through most of it back.
yeah, I
You know,
mean,
I've really only fell in love with it the last year.
yeah, same, really.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that from what I saw, I think the reason why Excalibur got so good was because at the beginning of AEW, Jim Ross was in the lead of commentary. But then slowly you start to see Excalibur take the reins, which kind of
Yes.
is a testament to how if you allow someone to really take control and do what they need to do, that's how you improve. So many
Yes.
people like you have and I can tie it back to like scripted promos. There's so many people that if you take the script away from them, and we've seen that so many times that like you compare it from a scripted promo to an unscripted promo. If you take the script away from them, you're going to see so much of a difference, and you're going to see an improvement to the level where you could be making stars right now. But the fact that you're putting a piece of paper in front of their hand and telling them like what to say and when to say it, that's why someone like Excalibur got so good. It's because sure you start off with Jim Ross because he's Jim Ross, but like slowly but surely Excalibur's learning from these guys, and now he's showing his expertise, and he's getting better to the point where Excalibur is going to be one of the best commentators, possibly of all time,
I
because
don't
of what he
disagree.
knows.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing him with Taz, Jericho, all these different guys that he's going to commentate for AEW in the next few years. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, and just to keep on this for a second, JR, when he first started announcing for AEW, I was cringing. Like it
Yeah,
wasn't the
there's that.
JR that I knew back in the WWE era.
Yeah.
But Excalibur's gotten so good now that Jim Ross, like he covers for what Jim Ross can't handle anymore. Or a couple of times, Jim Ross, he used to sound like he kind of felt lost out there, or he'd make a
Yes.
really stupid comment. And you notice they don't even let Jim Ross. I don't know if it's that they don't let him or Excalibur does it, but they don't even let Jim Ross announced to go into the picture-in-picture commercial, because every time he said restaurant quality picture-in-picture, I wanted to smack him across the head. I'm like, what the hell is restaurant quality picture-in-picture? And nowadays, I'm back to loving JR again, because that he, it's being covered. It's like Jericho. How good Jericho is. He's one of the best ever. And he's still so good because we can't see what he can't do anymore because he doesn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you have to change up your game when you get older. Like, I'm there all day for this version of Jim Ross, where in the beginning, like, I couldn't stand him. And I'm not even talking when he made the mistake and called it WWE Dynamite. Like,
Yeah.
listen, people make mistakes all the time that they don't get criticized because they're not Jim Ross.
Mm-hmm.
Like Excalibur, that
Yeah.
same night that Jim Ross had that, announced the wrong main event. And nobody
Right.
jumped on him for that.
Yeah.
Like, there's other things. Michael Cole makes mistakes all the time. People
Mm-hmm.
make mistakes all the time. But I just felt bad because Jim Ross felt lost. And I didn't want to see a guy that I had loved just be a shadow of what he used to be.
Yeah.
But
And I mean, like, all that I knew of Jim Ross really was like the big moments that he would call. So
yeah,
that's really where my comparison came from. But now that he's kind of like adjusting to this role, you're starting to see
yes.
like not the Jim Ross that you used to see, but like a Jim Ross that's kind of more comfortable in the role and letting Excalibur take the lead.
And he's so good. And it's
Mhm.
so good
Yeah,
again.
of course.
And it's great, great to see that. Like, I'm very, very happy to see that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, what do you, I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but so what are you enjoying now? What do you most look forward to now? Like, I give you credit because you're still going to WWE shows when I'm struggling to try and keep up with and want to keep it up with the product. Like, I've always promised myself I'm gonna go to a WrestleMania one year and I'm gonna go all out and I'm gonna go see everything. And like, do I really want to go spend the money on that now with the product not being what I wish it was?
Right.
Talk a little bit of your feelings now on both shows and how you keep your interest in WWE.
You know, what it really comes down to is that like I mentioned earlier on in the show, I'm never going to be the type of person that's like I'm just going to stop watching this show because I don't like what's going on. Like that's just not anyone really. Like once you're a wrestling fan, like you're going to keep watching. Be it like you take a little break or something, like you're
You're
always
gonna
going to watch.
follow even if you don't watch.
Exactly. Like, you know, to me, like if you watch WrestleMania every year, that's in still some capacity following wrestling. And I know a lot of people that do that. So
Yeah,
I kind of see that. But when it comes to what I'm like watching and what I'm liking nowadays, like I'm gonna be honest, like I like everything, you know, and it's weird to say, especially now with WWE and everything, but like, you know, AEW covers a lot of grounds that I like, and WWE also covers a lot of ground that I like. And where WWE lacks, AEW picks up on, and vice versa. You know, I really WWE, my fandom still with them is rooted in me being a fan of them for years. And, you know, it's hard to break away from that.
I
And
get it.
AEW is kind of giving me that little edge of something else to watch. And, you know, there's guys and girls on both shows that I'm loving. You know, I love watching you know, guys on WWE. I'm trying to think of just like specific names I can't think of off the top of my head, but like there are guys there that I like love watching, like Roman Reigns. I love watching him. You know, Drew McIntyre when they're booking him right. I love watching him. And of course, like I live for the big returns like Edge and John Cena. But even on like AEW programming, like there are guys that I'm like slowly becoming really big fans of. Adam Page. Never thought I would be a huge Adam Page fan, but here we are. You know, Jungle Boy, huge fan of it. Even like Anna Jay. I love watching Anna Jay. Like all these different people that I never thought I would be fans of. And you know, AEW is doing an amazing job in booking these people. Um, I will say, like, I haven't really watched like Impact or like, you know, New Japan. Like, for me, it's really coming down to like AEW and WWE, which I don't really see as a problem. Like, people are always like, whoever just watches like the main promotions aren't real wrestling fans. Like, if you watch wrestling, you watch wrestling, you're a fan. Um,
Agreed.
yeah, but like, you know, both companies, as much as they're doing right or they're doing wrong, I love watching both of them. Of course, I am the prime WWE fan on the Tavern. I called SmackDown the best show, better than AEW on the first week that I joined. Uh, but at the same time, it's like that I mean, well, first of all, like I still kind of agree with that opinion because that was a very good show. But like, I can't really choose one over the other because, like I said, like there's different levels to it, and both companies kind of cover different bases. So really, I love watching everything. I'm just happy that there's different stuff to watch. I'm happy that there's wrestling still. Even during the pandemic, like I was just happy that there was still wrestling going on. Sure, it wasn't great all the time, but like, during the pandemic to have wrestling, in a time where I was in a lockdown and it was fucking doing nothing, it was an amazing time to be a wrestling fan. There was wrestling going on, so there a
There's no
lot
other
of
sports, that's for sure.
exactly. So like, yeah, I would say I'm just a fan of everything.
That's awesome. I mean, I love you're so young, but yet your insight, I feels like above any other 19-year-old wrestling fan. Your work on the podcast is so good, especially like I said, if you listen to Classic Match Classroom, how he edit it, it's more than a podcast. It's almost like you're watching a documentary or mini documentary about a show. So
Thank you.
guys, definitely check out young Anthony. He's very talented, and this kid might have a future doing something. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm giving him
Thank you.
the little rub from the staple.
I appreciate that.
Dude, plug your podcasts and the Titantron and
Yes, yes. So yeah, podcast, you can find me for the Titantron with myself and my co-host Antonio, and we're still trying to figure out what we're doing with the podcast. But you can find us on Instagram at the Titantron Podcast, on Twitter at @the_Titantron. YouTube, you can subscribe to us, like our videos, do whatever. And listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcast, all of your podcast streaming platforms. And on the Classic Match Classroom, you can follow us at Classic Match Classroom on Instagram, at CM Classroom on Twitter, and again, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all those different platforms where you can listen to the podcast and support us in any way possible. Plus, we have Titantron merch. I don't. Do I have the mask here? I don't have the mask here, but we have all different merch that you could buy: t-shirts, mugs, masks, whatever you need. We have, and that is at the Titantron podcast.creator-spring.com. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I've been waiting to be on a Sessions episode. I'm very happy that I was able to be on this one. And yeah, I'm just glad that the Tavern has provided a platform for someone like me to kind of, keep my wrestling fandom going and like really grow with other wrestling creators. It's an awesome time.
it's a lot of fun. You have definitely, as soon as we had you on a debate show, it's like, wow, we got to use that kid. He's good. And I think I hit you up pretty quickly after that. And now you're
Yeah.
hosting the Raw Down show every
Yeah.
week, and you're doing a fantastic job. So good
Thank you.
job. Now plug the Tavern for me. You do it so well.
Oh man, putting me on the spot here, but of course, the Turnbuckle Tavern is doing some amazing work. You can go ahead and follow us wherever we are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I think we even have a TikTok. All these
We
different,
do.
platforms that you can find in the description below. If you liked what you heard from the both of us or any of our videos, make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. It goes a long way over here on YouTube, and as well as the different shows that we have on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all of your podcast streaming platforms. Variety for everyone: AEW fans, WWE fans, people who watch movies. We have stuff for everyone, and I know that you will enjoy all that we have. Plus, we have some merch that you can go ahead and follow and purchase some merch at prowrestlingtees.com/ what is it, Tavern? Turnbuckle Tavern.
Yeah,
Again,
you can
it'll
get
be in the
all of our links at theturnbuckletavern.com.
very
All of our
true.
social media, all of our shops, everything. You get everything. Follow all of our podcasts. Just go to theturnbuckletavern.com. You'll get all the links in one spot.
That's the place to be.
Yes, it is. Young Anthony, thank you so much for joining us today. This was definitely a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And until next week, guys, love, peace, and pro wrestling.